Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video. Today we're going to go right into Meraki and we're going to talk about Access Manager. Remember the last video I did about the Meraki overview? I kind of hinted like, hey, I wanted to start testing out Access Manager. Well, I actually got it in my organization. So now I've been testing out a couple things and it's hit or miss. Again, this is not in GA right now. So you still got to, you know, early access it, but I can see where, for somebody that's a smaller organization that don't want to really go through the pain of implementing a full feature NAC solution, um, Access Manager may be the way to go. Now, we're gonna go to the whiteboard real quick, give you a brief overview of Access Manager. Then I'll show you what it looks like in the dashboard here. Now, the one thing I do want to mention that I am using some older equipment. I think that's causing one of my issues when it comes to TLS cert-based authentication. So I'm going to have to upgrade some equipment, and I'm waiting for an AP to get in here, so I can't really display it or show you it on the AP side. So what I'm going to show you is just MAC authentication bypass, basically for my NAC heads out there. And I'm going to show you how it works, the policies and all that stuff. And then you'll see why I say this is ICE light. But if someone needs like a full feature NAC solution, Access Manager is 100% not the way to go. All right, so let's go into the whiteboard here. All right, so Access Manager, Meraki Access Manager. I'll just see AM, right? So basically what it is Meraki's attempt to have a radius solution or 802.1x solution without actually having to buy something like Cisco ICE, Fortinet, Forescout, stuff like that. That's basically what it is. So from a user perspective, what you would do, let's say you are the user here, and you have two ways to connect in. So we're going to use the switch. And look at that. You can tell I'm definitely a Cisco head, but that's a switch icon. And then we have the AP here. And we'll just put the little radio thing. Now, you would connect either way, wireless or wired. And what would happen is, instead of you going to a solution like NAC, Fortinet, Forescout, stuff like that, the Meraki equipment would actually talk to the Access Manager, which is in the cloud. So they would talk that way. Okay? And then in Access Manager, you'll have some policies, right? Now it's kind of similar to policy sets, kind of looks like it, but it kind of doesn't. So underneath here, you would have policy sets for a certain criteria, right? You want to match a certificate, you want to match a certain MAC address. Now, let me tell you this, there's no profiling in this. So anything that comes from a map perspective is all statically done, which is a headache. So nobody really wants to do that. Now, on the back end here, the only identity source that is currently supported is Entra ID. So you can do stuff based on Entra ID lookup, right? So even if you're doing surf-based authentication, you can have an Entra ID backend lookup for it so that it can say, hey, are you in a certain group in Entra ID? Does the certificate say this? Now, in my solution, or what I have set up here, is the certificate supplicant here, the certificate that's on the supplicant, I actually used MS or Intune, Microsoft Intune Cloud PKI, which, to be honest with you, is pretty cool. It's an easy way to set up a PKI kind of infrastructure or public key infrastructure. I don't want to be redundant. So it's an easy way to set up a public key infrastructure in Entra ID or in Azure, and you don't have anything on-prem you have to worry about, and it works very well with Intune. So if you want to push certificates through Intune, you're going to use SCEP, and you just pretty much use a URL that you get from when you originally create the root CA and the issuing CA. Again, there is one caveat to that though, is price. It is based on pure user. So if you have like 30,000 users, I think it's like $2 an account. So if you have 30,000 users, you can see that 60,000 a month, which is like $720,000 a year. So it can get really expensive for huge organizations. But smaller organizations who don't mind paying that extra, $2, I think it's $10 for the Intune suite as well. If you get that, then you have a way of having certificate-based authentication for wireless right now and wired in a smaller environment, and you don't have to worry about using your own internal infrastructure to support the PKI stuff. So with that being said, let's get to the lab and I'll show you what that looks like. So now we're here in the lab. And as you can see in the corner here, we have Access Manager. And this is all the stuff that you get in Access Manager. You can do adaptive policies, which are Cisco's versions of TrustSec. Let's look at adaptive policies real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, if you looked at any one of my ICE videos, subscribe to the channel if you haven't seen anything. Um, this looks very similar to the TrustSec matrix, right? So you have your source group and your destination group, and where they intersect is where you're going to put your policy. So to quickly explain this from a guest standpoint, anybody that's on guest, if they got the guest tag or adaptive policy group, they would not be able to talk to employees or iPhones, right? Or we have iPhones going to guests. So we're blocking it both ways here. From the source, we're saying if you're a guest, you can't talk to employees or iPhones. I might change that group. And if you're employees, you can't talk to guests. And if you're iPhones, you can't talk to guests. So basically, if you know anything about the TrustSec matrix, this is basically what it is. Now, what is the limitation of this in Meraki? 60 tags max, right? Now, they did that because they surveyed a bunch of corporations that did, TrustSec, these real big corporations, and they kind of looked at their client base and said, okay, most people don't go over 60 tags. My recommendation is don't go over, try to keep it within 15 to 20, okay? Because it's an N times N, all right? So what's that mean? You got 100 tags, you got 100 tags for source, 100 tags destination, 1,000 different policies, right? So always think about that if you're ever going to get into TrustSec kind of enforcement stuff. So from a group perspective, these are all the groups, right? Now, unknown and infrastructure were default. They came in, and then I just created these 3 to give you some kind of reference point of, group tags. Now, in the Cisco world, traditional enterprise networking worlds, SGTs, in Meraki is adaptive policy groups. So they're talking the same thing, it's just everybody got to call it something different. So from your custom ACLs, would be your SG ACLs in the TrustSec world, but they just call it custom ACLs in Meraki. And then you can actually bind, well, this will enable the enforcement. Now, the reason why this is disabled right now, because I do not have the switches that support this. The only thing, if you want to actually implement this in real world, you need to have either the Catalyst 9K series or the MS390s. That's really it. And I wouldn't even do MS390s. I would just go right to Catalyst 9Ks. Because MS390s are not, they're not, let me say it's like a container in the switch hardware, whereas Catalyst 99Ks are like native, right? They're iOS native instead of having a container on some hardware. So you don't want to, if you're going to pick between the two, go Catalyst 9Ks. So that is from the adaptive policy standpoint. Now, from a client standpoint, if you want to do MAB, and this is what I'm going to demonstrate here, you would go to clients, and then here's one of my connected groups, and I created a group called client group, and then MAB, and I have one client in there, and that's the test machine that's back there. And I'm going to make a policy based on that. Now, users, that is if you had it hooked up in the Entra ID, and I do have it hooked in the Entra ID, but it will just pull everything down, and then you can look at the groups, all that good stuff, and then you can create your policies based on that. Because I have old equipment and I think that it hasn't worked, I'm not even going to waste your time and click on users. Once I get the new equipment, we'll come back to here and I'll show you how to do it based on users. But with this MAB demonstration, all you got to do is worry about clients. And again, if you click clients and you want to add a client, the cool part about this is since Meraki knows everything in here, you can kind of add a client to a group. So if I go to add groups, if I wanted to add something in here, and all I would do is do the client search, and it'll pull up the search. Like I can add a client, I can add an existing client. All it would do is just pull up all the MAC addresses that it's seen, and I could just select it. But again, this is all manual. There is no profiling here. So anybody that thinks they're going to be using, profiling engines like you would do in ICE to dynamically assign stuff, not going to happen. But again, I think this is for smaller organizations. If you're a big enterprise, don't even think about using Access Manager. Go right to Cisco ICE. Now, from a policy standpoint, it's called Access Rules. Now, anybody that's an ICE head probably knows what a policy set is, and this is somewhat similar to that. So think of this as a policy set. So I just named the policy set. And if I click on this, now what are we going to match? Now in this, I literally have what's in the organizational unit of the certificate equals Intune, because that's what's in my certificate on the test machine. And then you give restricted access. Now, if you say allow access, that's just unfeathered. That's like your permit access. When you say restricted access, that's what you get to pick. Okay, they're in VLAN 2. They get this adaptive policy employees. And as you saw with the grouping or the APGs, the active policy groups, that was one of them there. Now, the next one here is the map. So if I match this, I'm going to look at a client group. If I hit the down arrow here, called map test. Okay, that's the group I just showed you. If it's in there, they get this restricted access. Now, if I wanted to create another one, I'll just hit add rule here, and I'm going to show you the Entra ID one. So let's just call this Entra test, Entra ID test. So where is it coming from? You got to go down here where it says Entra ID. Remember, I told you I have this already hooked in. And now if I say group, it's going to look at the groups and it will pull every group that I have. So see, here's all the groups that I have: VPN users, private access, sales, all users, all kind of stuff, legal. And then you can say, all right, I'm going to match on that. When I get that certificate, it's going to do the Entra ID lookup to see if you're in that group. And if you're in that group, whatever access, right? Now, if you're going to do certificates, you need to actually upload your trust chain. So you go to certificates here, Access Managed Certificate tab, and here's my trust chain. Now, again, this, I named it, so this is the PK Cloud PKI, so I have the root CA and the sub CA. Now, the thing here is you have to upload the entire trust chain. When you're using the Cloud PKI, when you download it, it is not in the format that Access Manager wants. Do not use Mac to do this. I was struggling on the Mac for an hour to try to get the cert chain right, and no matter what I was doing, it was not accepting it. I had to actually export it on a Windows device to a base 64 because that's what it's looking for. Then I had to open it in a notepad, make the trust chain correct, save it as a base 64 again, and then upload it, and then it actually took. Right, so now you can see the actual cert chain here. And on the certificate, everything is trusted, so there's no problem. So now what we're going to do before we do session logs, I'm going to go ahead and bounce the port that machine is on. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to buy a 390. And if you get a 390 and you want to take advantage of this stuff, you need advantage licensing. You can't really do it on an enterprise. So that's another caveat. You get the MS390 or Catalyst or something like that, you need to make sure you have advantage licensing to take care of this, because this is Meraki's versions of microseg. If you get enterprise, now you're gonna have to upgrade. So now let's go into this port here. And let's bounce it. But before I do that, let's go to access policies, because you have to see what's on here. So this is the access policy that is applied to the port. So I just named it this. I'm using Access Manager as the server. If you hit Radius Server, you would have to change. So if I hit Radius Server, I now have to put in that Radius Server stuff. This is what you would traditionally do if you were going to something like ICE. but we're not, so we're going to go to Meraki Manager or Access Manager. Hybrid, I got single host. I'm doing it in both directions. Something similar. No critical off VLANs for voice and data. That's a totally different concept. Um, and that's it. And that's applied to the port. So now I can actually go to that switch port here and bounce the port. And then we're going to look at the session log. And what you're going to see is ETLS is going to fail, even though the certificate and all that stuff is right, because I took the same machine and put it in my ICE lab with the same trust chain, and it worked perfectly fine. So I think it's a quit. So we're going to bounce the port, and now we're going to go to session log. Now, session logs look like Radius Live logs, but I like Radius Live logs better because it gives you a lot more detail. Unfortunately, Access Manager does not give you a lot of detail. It will give you a reason why it failed, but doesn't give you too much detail into that. So eventually, we're going to see is this TLS handshake failed after receiving a client alert. And then you're going to see it kick in the map. So again, right here, it failed because something going on with the TLS handshake. And this is literally all they give you. And they say investigate the client configuration or certificate. I already did that, and I also verified it in my own ICE environment with the same trust chain and certificate. So, and that works. So I think it may be something going on the Meraki side, or just the MS350 just ain't working. But looks similar to Radius Live Logs, very similar, but it doesn't give you too much information. Again, smaller environment. Anybody in the enterprise probably wouldn't like this. Now let's look at the MAB because the MAB was successful because it's the same MAC address and MAB went through. So we click on this here. As you can see, that's the username with the MAB. You see the policy that we hit, which was that policy for MAB. It got on VLAN 2, and it got the adaptive policy for, employees, whatever you want to call it, that I called it. And then you scroll down, you get the same information. You see this service type of call check. Call check is for MAB. So anybody wants to, if you're taking your ICE exam and they tell you something with a call check, you know that's MAB. All right. If it was something else, it'd be frame. And then you kind of see the Cisco AV pairs. Now you see what I was saying about they call it something different, but it's the same thing. It says security group tag. But if you tell somebody security group tag in Meraki, they'll say adaptive policy groups. So it's literally the same thing. And then you get to see, hey, here's the VLAN, here's the VLAN 2 that I got put in, and then it tells you what port 3. So it's similar to Radius Live Logs. It's just not as detailed as something in ICE. Again, if you're a huge enterprise, I would definitely go directly to ICE and not Access Manager. If you're a smaller organization, this may work for you. Now, from a client standpoint, the cool part about this is we can actually see the authentications in here. So now if I click this machine here, this is my test machine, up at the top, you'll start seeing here's some failed authentications, failed authentication, failed authentication. The rest are green because they're MAP. So the MAP kicked in. So 802.1x failed and then MAP kicked in. And that is Access Manager in a nutshell. Like I said, this is something for, it's not out in the public just yet. I think they're still working on it. If you are a smaller organization, no more than maybe like 15, 20, a little bit more, you might want to use Access Manager because you probably don't have the budget to really put in like a full-fledged solution like ICE. This is for people that they don't have the budget for it, right? But they still need that 802.1x MAB, that NAC solution, the front door to your network solution to stop anybody from just plugging in randomly, getting on your network. So, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you got some value out of it, please don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to get some more equipment. I'm going to be testing out this Access Manager a little bit more to get some more details on it, but I think it's a really cool product. This is Don from Pilot Technologies again. Thank you and have a nice day.